Thank you, Florencia. Thank you, Juan Pablo, for such an engaging conversation. So now we will start our first panel. The idea is that we will see 4 short presentations, 4 or 5 short presentations, and then we'll have a couple of respondents that will react to what we will see. So the first is by Javier Rodriguez. Javier Rodriguez belongs to Aqua Alta. Aqua Alta, it's a collective, it's a non-profit association formed by more than 50 professionals, mostly architects and students, whose objectives is to promote sustainable development from the perspective of academic and interdisciplinary research, focus on proposing strategies and tactics of public, social, and cultural interest. Javier is by training a journalist. He's also professor at Universidad Católica de Asunción in Paraguay. He's a member of AICA, which is the Asociación Internacional de Críticos de Arte, and also, as I said, member of Aqua Alta Paraguay. So let's welcome Javier to the stage. Just a brief logistic note. Janet will keep the time, and she will let you know how much time you still have when you're presenting, so thank you.
Thanks to everyone, to the organizers, Professor Baldheim, Pedro, our virtual Cicerone until now, to the Malva, and well, to all of you that are here today. Also to the Universidad Católica de Asunción, Paraguay, and the Aqua Alta group. I wanted to try to share some notes, focus on the context of the project of Nanagua. I'll try my best in Spanish, though, sorry. Well, first, a few tricky links from a also tricky model, and also well-known links, though. Like 3 years ago, Aqua Alta presented a project for the International Asunción Art Biennial. As these images show, the project was located in Nanagua, a riverside village placed on front of Asunción, on the opposite coast of the River Paraguay. In that presentation, the project also was explained through a maquette. This maquette was in fact the diagram of the branch structures that will create a sort of an artificial forest in the place. Maybe, given that they claim that in Maca language, Nanagua means white quebracho trees, forest. To understand this artificial forest, a small trick was proposed. The spectator was not supposed to look at the forest, the model of the forest, but to his image, reflected upon a mirror or made of water that was placed at the base of the model. So, link 1, tricky link 1. And perhaps the mirror of the model resembles another more ancient, the dark mirror or cloth mirror, named in allusion of Claude Lorrain, a painter of the 17th century, whose representation of the landscape, although very idealized, fixed, however, the way we should look at nature. It probably self-portrait of the 18th century, by the English landscape painter Gainsborough show us how that mirror was used. Number two, and perhaps this scheme of use of the mirror will resemble some other diagram of the process of cyanosis as proposed by Charles Peirce in the 19th century. He also proposed design as a relation. Then, the landscape could also be understood as a sign, as constructions that links a social subject with nature, whatever nature meant throughout history. Link, something like that. Link number 3. But on the other hand, the meaning of language is its actual use of it. As proposed by Wittgenstein, it may well happen that the meaning of a landscape is the use of landscape. That's it, the relationship established with the subject and subject established with space. But this usage, meanings, relationships, these landscape gains, to paraphrase Wittgenstein, albeit with some modifications, are play in concrete cultural contexts. And these contexts establish also real social, political relation between the players of these landscape games. So, of course, not the aim to reduce the complexity of the society-landscape relations only to its political or material aspects. But the landscape in this well-known painting, also Gainsborough, had really little of natural. On the contrary, this landscape has been modified extensively by man. And those modifications had concrete political implications, such the enclosures, the rural migration to the cities, the agricultural revolution that led to industrial revolution, and so on and so on. The Paraguayan landscape, this one, painting, also looks very natural, but without conflicts or problems of any kind. But that naturalization of the landscape can be explained in Paraguay, among other reasons, in terms of a large latifundia created after the so-called Tribal War between 1864 and 1870. And after the completion of this war, a process of massive concentration of rural land began. Today, the results of this process have become dramatic. Like 3% of the population owns more than 80% of the Paraguayan landscape, to say, put it in that way. Well, it's in Spanish. Rivers under landscape, asymmetrical uses and excluding appropriations. But let's go to Nanahua again. The symmetric and excluding appropriation of rural, forest territory tend to repeat themselves in these two cities. On the better position, the logic will be on the better, very predictable, by the way, on the better position of the areas of the riverside, also the better resource social actors, be private or public, place activities of exclusionary nature in general, like see, military quarters, infrastructure, private recreational facilities, etc., etc. On the other sections that became inaccessible to the perspective speculative real estate interest, house the popular classes traditionally. They had, these places fulfilled, and still do, the function of absorbing the demographic growth of a population that is progressively marginalized by scarcely inclusive social, economical policies. This happened given the lack of public investment, until very recently, be it economical or social investment. See. Between these contexts, the coastline works, those works they are making by, principally by government today, also implies environmental risk and the accentuation of the Rio Paraguay coastline gentrification process. Emergency and reversion. This project for Nanahua could be described from two main intentions: emergency and inversion. Emergency in a double sense. On short terms, it was a concrete situation of social or urban urgency that linked Aqua Alta collective to Nanahua, to that community. I refer to the periodical floods and its negative social economic effects, but also emergency considered at longer terms, paying attention to the fact that between the 80s and the 90s of the 20th century, Asunción suburbs emerged like a process, including Nanahua, which is anterior, but in that time was linked more strongly with Asunción. And this happens outside in a correct social or urbanistic control. At the same time, we talk about this, we try to put this project of Nanahua in terms of reversion, given that the project aims precisely to reverse or mitigate the aforementioned ways of excluding appropriation on the riverside landscape. Siguiente. Okay. Proposals. The proposal from Nanahua focused on these two words and centered on particular aspects judged as priorities between the general problems of the settlement. Regarding the interurban mobility and connectivity with Asunción and some other nearby localities, nowadays the existing infrastructure favors basically vehicles. For example, the travel distance between Nanahua and Asunción is 40 kilometers. It is done mainly through a bridge, no? But, which is north. But the real distance between Nanahua and Asunción is less than 1 kilometer. Thus, it was proposed to modernize and expand the river transport network, which already is taking place, but with limited coverage and less than ideal technical conditions. This will allow to consider connectivity and the urban project itself in territorial terms and even incorporate extra national connectivity, given the border situation with the nearby city of Clorinda in Argentina. Given the periodic floods, the graphic we've seen before, the housing program is perhaps the most serious or the most urgent in Nanahua. In this sense, today more spread building systems are in Nanahua are very vulnerable to periodic floods. To confront this situation, housing was proposed from technical and typological alternatives in order to try to find best answers to the necessary links that should exist between housing and its physical environmental support. Okay. The projects for the International Art Biennial may gathers and spans those actions I have mentioned. The strategic proximity and the free space in Nanahua allows connecting Nanahua with Asunción to revitalize both sides of the river. This connection will be by water, and the use of cars will be optional. Paraphrasing the trees and the water, the idea of the project was to build a forest for the biennial. Architecture is defined by a system of branch structures that in their repetition suggest the idea of a forest. These structures also will work as cooling towers for thermic control and simultaneously as half shadows because of the weather, thus shaping a space of a great dimensions and clear public use for Asunción and Nanahua. The Nanahua project was built upon a system of embankments that gives shape to a drain channels. The platform upon the embankments will be site level 64, the highest level in strong flooding. The drainage channels will be calculated to absorb the average and highest periodical floods registered throughout history. Also, these draining channels empty in empty times, when the level of the Rio Paraguay is low, will be the big galleries for transitory exhibitions for the biennales or some other like that. Finally, if we assume that a project looks to propose a model whereby space and desire could converge, this project of Nanahua was formulated from a desire to reconcile the city with its fluvial landscape. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Javier. I just want to make a brief note. It's super important that we stick to the 10 minutes we have. Otherwise, we will stay here until, it's not that we don't like to be here, but we are very ambitious and we want to have many people talking. So please, guys, we have to be careful with time. We are very glad to invite also our next presenters. They are Eduardo Cohen and Eduardo Chorén and Sofía Heinonen. Eduardo is a businessman, a partner in Pampa Partners, a green real estate company that he co-founded together with Douglas Tompkins. Trained in economics, he has overseen commercial and agricultural production for Ríos, Tompkins properties in Argentina for 14 years. And as a minor partner and executive director, Chorén helped found and develop Laguna Blanca project alongside the Tompkins. By her side, Sofía Heinonen integrates the directory of CLT Argentina and leads the project Esteros Ibera since the beginnings of 2005. Before that, for 15 years, she was working in the administration of Parques Nacionales, based in Iguazú, and managing also Parques del Noreste Argentino, and also in an NGO that also defended protected areas and species in danger. So please, let's welcome Sofía and Eduardo.
Hello, everyone. I'm an ecologist, so the language of landscape that I understand is the language of nature. And this is what we basically do, all our team, Tompkins Conservation in Argentina. We work towards the restoration of landscapes for an agroecological agriculture or the complete ecosystem restoration. So basically I will mention what are the values and the bullet points behind our work in both cases. We work, as they said, by the leader. Our leader was Douglas Tompkins. He was a designer, and he was really enthusiastic about the idea of restoring landscape based on natural laws, no? The nature laws. Laguna Blanca, it was bought mostly 10 years ago, and it was a industrial agriculture landscape, and basically through the values of beauty and the values of understanding the laws of nature through biological conservation knowledge, and pretending to restore soil, using basically the mapping of topography and watershed sheets to protect both soils and water. They designed all these terraces, and also in pretending to leave the natural barriers to avoid the pest dispersal, and also to maintain the coverage of soils and the microorganism diversity in landscape. It emerged this beauty related to agriculture landscapes. You can see what was before when he bought the land and what it ends to be, no? Beauty emerged when we respect basically the language of nature, and we try, all our decisions are driven by the minimal impact, no? Bueno, different seasons make different patterns of colors and textures. And this in the long term, although it's a commercial purpose that is behind this, beauty is the long-term most important benefits that can be shared with others. And on the other hand, we also work in the restoration of wild ecosystems, but most of the ecosystem we have in Argentina have been degraded. And although Iberá, and this is in Corrientes, is an enormous wetlands, we have, as all ecosystem in Argentina, we have a lot of invasive species, and one of the things that almost all the ecosystem have is the extinction of top predators. What does this mean? A top predator is if you're an ecologist, you will know that a complete ecosystem is one that has all the nature species, that the species that evolve in that territory. But and they have a special ecological role. Many species, when you started to degrade the ecosystem, they started to lose their ecological role, and the top predators are the one who creates the landscape of fear. Landscape, what is that? Landscape of fear is the landscape that means that the prey's behavior is conditioned by the presence of the predator. And they will not risk their life because they can be eaten. So they just moves, when there's a top predators, they don't move very long from the places they can have their refuge. So when there's not a top predators, all this prey behaves in another way. They're much more tame. They don't are afraid of nothing, so they start to disperse and eat in a different way. So the landscape, although it's a wild landscape, it have a complete different expression. And in Iberá, we don't have the jaguar. The jaguar are the top predators, and what we are trying to do is restore the landscape through from bringing back all the species that were extinct here, including the jaguar. And that at the end will bring back the beauty, the real beauty, and also the spectacle, so that this landscape can become a tourist destination with a new economy for people in the place. I will let Eduardo to explain better.
Okay. Thank you all for the invitation, Pedro, Marcela, David Rockefeller Center, Harvard, and hope that my English is at the level to do this. I will focus in, Sofia mentioned, we had the opportunity to work together with Douglas Tompkins, who was, maybe you know him, main private donor of national parks. He was the founder of the North Face and Esprit. So to us was really something important in our lives. So I will focus in Laguna Blanca. Laguna Blanca is a 3,000 hectares farm in Entre Ríos province on the confluence of the Paraná River and the Feliciano River. 3,000 hectares, 1,200 productive, and the rest of it conservation and lakes, lowlands. And what we tried to do was, the former owner deforested the whole thing, so what we tried to do was to understand the farm and try to do something special, and that's why Pedro and Marcela invited us to show or to share how landscape was included in the farm, in farming. Our objectives at the beginning were, urgent one was to stop the erosion. It was a mass there. Erosion was out of control. And the important one was designing a master plan including many objectives. Diversity in every sense, good aesthetics as part of the project, excellence, as you may see here. And the idea was to create an experimental farm and trying to achieve our main goal, that was no-till organic. That means not to use more chemicals in the system. We were working together for 10 years or so. Sadly, Doug died in December 2015. So we couldn't have the chance to finish the whole thing. That was to have a final product, to have industry there. And good news, in a certain way, is that 2 months ago, a new owner bought the place, and he decided to continue partially with the project, not with everything. Stopping erosion, as I said, was the most important things there, and to do that, we started working with many professionals to achieve this kind of situation, with terraces, control lines, in order to manage the flow of the water and to avoid erosion. And these pictures, as Sofia showed, this is typical thing. This is for real. This is not something created. As you can see, also we have the 14 crops, and we used to have. We also have fruit plantations there. Diversity, okay, diversity was the name of the game there. So 14 also species and varieties of fruit plantations. We include animals in the system, as you can see. And what Doug used to say was that beauty saves soils, since while we were doing this with the before and after, neighbors started to copy part of the experience that we have, which means good things and good for the soil. The before and after, you can produce like this, on top, but it's better if you produce that way. And farming as art, Doug used to say that tractor drivers were artists there, and cultivating diversity. We used to farm with the wild, since Doug, as conservation was a top guy. And the function and beauty. You can produce like this in the left, but we used to produce like that. So the idea here is that if you are in front of a fence, a building, or whatever, you always have the chance to include design and aesthetics to have a better outcome, to improve the whole thing. So this is more and more. So this is a quote by Doug, which is interesting to see. The last email that I received from him was a week before he died, and was the last draft of the book. And again, was an honor to me being part of it. Sofía also thinks the same. It's a bonus for me was working together with my wife. She's the architect in Laguna Blanca, so thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now it's really a pleasure for me to invite to the stage a very close friend, and that will show us a project that it's also very important for us at IDB. So she is Agustina González Cid. Agustina is an architect from the National University of Rosario. She holds a Master in Science from MIT, where she attended as a Fulbright Scholar. She currently works at the Metropolitan Coordination Agency in Rosario, in charge of the program for rural and peri-urban territory. Agustina also practices as an architect, and she has been awarded in several international design competitions. She teaches at the School of Architecture and Urban Studies at Torcuato Di Tella University and at the National University in Rosario. González Cid current research is focused on analyzing the urban condition of productive landscapes and designing new territorial logics based on the interaction between human actions and ecology. Please, let's welcome Agustina.
Okay, thank you, Felipe and all. I'm going to talk about my work at the Metropolitan Coordination Agency, and I'm going to be talking about the rural and peri-urban landscape in the Rosario metropolitan area. So I know this conference, as Charles mentioned, has been visiting different cities in Latin America, and all these places have very different landscapes. So when I was thinking about preparing this lecture today, I thought about what's different in the Argentinian context. So even though if in Argentina we have some of the same conditions as in Colombia or in Chile, in Santiago, we have something special, especially in this central area, that is the Pampas. And this almost abstract flatness that is all around us. So this is what identifies our landscape, and this is part of our culture too. So with this flat land, mild weather, and all sufficient water, we have the perfect place to produce food, and this is how the territory was manufactured. So if we can see here, so here's Buenos Aires, where we are now. This is the city of Rosario and Córdoba. And if we can see all these spots here are the towns that were created as part of the productive system. So the territory was manufactured as a funnel that guides all the production produced in the west of the country to the east, to one of the ports in Rosario, and then south through the Paraná River to the Atlantic Ocean. And this is how the territory works. These towns and railway systems still exist, the production still is there, but it has changed somehow, because from this very rigid system that was guided by the railway and the silos in every town, now the system changed a lot, because now grains are kept in silo bags in the different parcels. The same owners keep them in their parcels, and also these grains are moved by trucks, which also made the system more flexible, with all the problems that this brings, but I'm not going to talk about this. So this is the city of Rosario, on the west coast of the Paraná River. And we, in Rosario, we are still dealing with all these logics that are there from the beginning of the setting of the territory. So this is the metropolitan area of Rosario. It's composed by 26 cities and towns, and it's coordinated by the Metropolitan Coordination Agency, or from Spanish, Ente de Coordinación Metropolitana, where I'm in charge of the rural and peri-urban landscape. So if we see the Rosario metropolitan area landscape, we can see that these green wedges enter the metropolitan area, which is not very common in other metropolitan areas that are completely consolidated, and these rural landscapes are part of our everyday lives. So this is what we see, like people commuting from one city to another to work. This is what people see every day on their daily commuting. And this is the horizon that is almost omnipresent in our daily lives. So it's important to understand that keeping these places, it's fundamental in the metropolitan area, but also it has some problems that we are dealing with. Some of these problems are the use of pesticides. As you may know, this is bringing problems between neighbors, so producers use pesticides and the neighbors complain about it and are worried about their health issues. And on the other hand, we are dealing with the pressure of real estate, and private parties that are pushing to change these rural landscapes to urban. Apart from this, push from these private parties that are pushing to change these sites that are close to the urban centers to expand the urban plan, are also pushing away farmers, which is a problem because this also pushes away food production from the metropolitan area. So with all these complexities that the metropolitan area has, we are dealing with two different logics. On the one hand, the grid that was established as property division and also to coordinate production. This is the grid. And on the other hand, these natural systems that it's pre-existent and it's part of the site that is Pago de los Arroyos, that is the place where the creeks are. That's how the area of Rosario used to be called. So between these two systems, or these two logics, we are working. We have just finished the first stage of a program with, that is financed by the Inter-American Development Bank through the program of metropolitan areas and the province of Santa Fe, and we have just finished planning 13 of these 26 cities or towns. And this is the result of how we establish the peri-urban, because we understand that by establishing it, we are protecting both the urban and the rural. Also, we have, instead of like establishing one fixed measure, like some laws here in the country suggest, what we are doing is understanding where water is, where production is, and by that, every city has a completely different peri-urban land. So for the second stage, we are now going to be working with the remaining cities, and because Rosario already has a plan, what we are going to do is work on 5 projects that are the shared spaces between Rosario and other cities, and it has a very big component of landscape on it. So I'm going to show the very first raft of this one that is the northwest one, which is very interesting. I find it the most interesting of all because it has all this green area. It has this system of rivers and water overflows that overlap with production. And apart from that, it has some big infrastructures like water dams that are, some are already built and some are planned, and the airport in the middle of all. So it's a very complex place, very, very interesting at the same time. So this is some of the first studies that we're doing. So we are kind of identifying the connection between the different cities, that this is Funes, Ibarlucea, and the street that we are planning here to connect them, the expansion of the airport, and some elements that it's interesting to see. And what is more important is that what we are thinking now is that how to give value to these creeks or canals that exist, since nowadays production is right to the border of them. We are planning to give them space for to develop more biodiversity, and also to suggest different uses. For example, where it's more convenient to have cattle instead of soy, and where it's more convenient to let water overflow and to have a pedestrian path. So these are the elements that we are now considering for the project. Thank you.